churches are not going to be happy with me making this message, but I believe that this is something that is very important to at least consider and discuss. Now, I'm going to tell you why I believe that churches in general are wasting your money. Now, when you talk to people about church, one of the first things people will say is that they just want your money. Now, this can be true in many cases out there. There are churches that are enriching themselves at the expense of people who are giving. But in many cases, this isn't the case. People are giving to a church, and the church is well-meaning and well-intentioned and desiring to do good with that money, but they're actually wasting your money. Think about it. Where does most of the money actually go that goes to a church? You see expensive buildings, you see large and unnecessary staff, many of which positions should be volunteer positions, and you also see expensive equipment as well. So many costs to run a church. And I don't have any problems with a pastor being paid a salary to be able to focus on the work of ministry. No problems at all. But think about this. If a pastor is paid a reasonable average salary, and say people in the church were giving 10%, we're not required to give 10%, but just say out of their own heart they were deciding to give 10%. You would only actually need 10 people to pay for a pastor's salary. Yet in many of these churches, there's 50, 100, 200, 500, over 1,000 people that are contributing to the church. Where is all this extra money going? There is just so much wastage there. We see in the Bible that the model for giving and the work that the church should be doing is to give to the poor and needy. Both in the church, among the believers, they should be taken care of first, and then also outside of that. It's interesting how churches will often quote the passage in 2 Corinthians 9 about being a cheerful giver, but they often won't quote verse 9, which says, "As it is written, he has distributed freely, he has given to the poor, his righteousness endures forever." Who are they giving to generously? To the poor, to those who are in need. But oftentimes what we're seeing in these churches today is the reverse. Rather than the church giving to the poor, we're actually seeing the poor giving to the church. And this is so backwards. I just don't see this in the Bible. I don't see the way that church is done today in terms of these expenses in the Bible at all. It's a cultural construct. And I believe that there is just so much wastage today. And it makes me think to myself, and it should make you think as well, if you're going to be giving your money to a local church, where is that money going? I think it's fair to ask those questions. And I'm not saying that there's deliberate wastage, but I think a lot of times there just can be, because that's just the way things are done. It's oftentimes like with the government as well. If it's not their own money, people will tend to spend it more liberally. And people can fall into a mindset where they think we need to have this particular thing or do things in this way so that we're bringing more people in, and you can appeal to carnality, or also that we need these specific positions in order to be able to meet the needs of these people, where really the church should be active and alive and thriving, where people are naturally coming alongside one another and meeting the needs. Like I said, I don't mind a pastor receiving a salary, but oftentimes you'll see many ministry positions which are completely unnecessary, huge expenditure on the staff, and meanwhile a very small percentage of the money that's coming in actually being given to the poor and needy, actually going towards helping the saints that are in the church and that are struggling. And to me, this is concerning. I want the money that I give to go to help those who are in greatest need, not to establish a church which operates more like a corporation, a business, and has this large staff, which really should be volunteer positions. There's a really good example of a church here in Adelaide. Now, he runs a business and does church on the Sunday. He doesn't collect up an offering. He doesn't take a salary. I said a pastor can take a salary, but he chooses not to. And he simply hires out a hall for $30 for 2 hours on a Sunday. And there are no other overheads. Now, I'm not saying that every church has to do things in this way, but it just goes to show how simply it can be done. And he's preaching on Sunday. If you had 4 men that can preach, you're only preaching, once a month, and you can actually run a church in a way that is completely different to the way that these other churches are done, with all of these expenditure. And then if he decides that people can contribute to the church, those contributions can actually go towards helping people in need, rather than creating more staff and turning it into something like that. I think if we were to go back and look at the churches in the Bible, we would be very surprised. Yes, there were house churches, but even if we aren't doing house churches today in places, we could do things in a way that much more closely resembles what the Bible did, and use these finances to actually bless the poor and the needy. So I don't want to cut down churches or anything like that, but I just want to put this out there because no one really talks about this. We just sort of take it for granted. Oh, that's the way it's done. But I don't think that's the way it should be done. So have you ever thought about this before? I would love to get your thoughts. Leave your comments below. Tell me what you think about this, and I'll talk to you soon. God bless you, friends.